Previous video we did the whole setup. Now in today's video we are going to build a portfolio website exactly like the one you see here. We do it step by step, and along the way you see some helpful tips like this popping up. Now if you are an experienced front-end developer, then this video is probably not for you. However, if you are fairly new with React or you want to know how to build a website from scratch, then this is a good video to watch. Alright, so let's start building the portfolio website. So what we first going to do is that we start the application via npm start. And as mentioned in the previous video, if you watched that video, this loads a development server and our website, so we can modify it locally and we immediately see the changes here. So that's very handy. Let's have a deeper look into the app component first. Now, a React component, like you see here, is just a function that returns some JSX. So what you see here is not HTML, it is JSX, and React converts it behind the scenes to HTML. Now we also use this JSX to style our components with CSS, which you will also see later in this video. Now in React we can create stateless and stateful components. Now in this video we are only going to create stateless components, since we are just outputting data, and for that reason we don't really need any state to be handled. These stateless components are also called DOM or presentational components, and they are written as functions. Now in React we have normal functions which are written like this, but we also have so-called arrow functions. And there are some differences between the two, but for now they aren't that important. What is important for now is that the app component here is a stateless component, since we don't handle any state, so we can write this component as a function. Now what we see here is a normal function, but we could write the same with a arrow function, and the syntax of that would be like this. And then here we have the arrow. Alright, so this is basically the same. Well, behind the scenes there are some differences, but for now they aren't important, and we will use arrow functions because that's what I prefer. Alright, let's now start with creating our pages, or components I have to say. And we start with creating a folder called components. And inside that components folder we create our components. Now we will create the following components. We will create a Navbar, so we will create a folder called Navbar. And inside that Navbar folder we will create a file called navbar.js. And if you watched the previous video, you know that we talked about a plugin or an extension called Simple React Snippet, and because of that we can simply type SFC, which stands for Stateless Functional Component, and when we then press enter we only have to give this a name, and let's call this also Navbar. And inside here we can already write some JSX. So let's say we have a div, and inside that div for now we just print the title of the page, so let's call this navbar or navigation bar for now. Now we will do the same for the other components which we are going to create, so we will create a new folder called about, and inside that about folder we will create a file called about.js, and then in here we will create another stateless functional component which we call about. And in here we will also just print out a header saying about. Now we will do this for all other components, so I will create them now, and I will speed up the video a bit because I repeat the same steps over and over again, and I don't want to waste your time. So hang on and I will be back in a second. Alright, welcome back. I created all the components and they all have the same structure. So we have a folder, and then inside that folder we created a JS file with the same name as the folder, as you see here. So we will create a navbar, a home page, an about page, then a skills page and a YouTube page, and finally a contact page. So that's how our portfolio website will look like. Alright, so now we created all the components, and then we can inject them in our app. So we can do import, then we give it a name navbar, and you can give this any name you like, and then you say from, and then the path to the component, which is components /navbar/navbar. And yeah, it's not needed to say .gs. Well, you can do it, I think, but yeah, I will do it like this. Inside here, we just import the navbar like this. And when we now go to the browser, you'll see that it is injected. So we are going to do this for all the other pages. Bam. Make the screen a bit like this. Yeah, so I prepared this already a bit, and I don't have to type everything because I don't want to waste your time. And then in here we can inject it. So if we now go to the browser, we see that all the headers are printed. So this is the beginning. It doesn't look smooth yet, but hey, it's a start, you know. So we now have the basic setup, and let's now develop each component that we see here one by one. And let's start with the navbar. Alright, so in here we are going to write some JSX code. So we will create a navbar. So we give it the nav tag. And then inside that we will create a unordered list. In here we will create list items. So we can do this. And inside here we can use the A tag. Now this tag has an aref element, which can be used to link from one page to the other, or link to a section of a page via IDs. Now we haven't set up the IDs yet, but for now I will just write them. So this should go to the home page. And yeah, then we will basically do the same for all the other pages. So this is the about me page, and it should go through the section with the ID of about. Now we will set this ID later, so then it will make sense. Sorry, I have to call this about me. I think that's nicer. And this is the skills page. So we give it the ID skills. And we will do the same for the YouTube section. And finally, contact section. So if we now look inside the browser, let's zoom in a bit. We have this, but again, this looks also awful. So let's start the styling. Now in React there are more than one way to style a component. You can use, for instance, inline styling, you can use styled components, regular CSS, CSS, modules, and probably there are many more options, I don't know, but in this video we will mainly use CSS modules and also a little bit of inline styling, because that are the ways that I prefer, but it is of course a personal preference. So let's start styling this page with the use of CSS modules. Now, in order to use CSS modules, we need to apply a naming convention. So we need to create a new file, and then in here we can give the file any name we like. So yeah, I will give it the same name as the JS file, but then we have to do dot module and then dot CSS, and then we press enter. Make this a bit larger. Now this navbar .module.css file, we will locally scope this to the navbar component. And an advantage is that we don't have to worry a lot about conflicts, since this CSS module is only locally scoped to this navbar component. Now what we can now do is the following. We can go to the navbar.js file, and then the first thing that we need to do is that we need to import this CSS file. So we can say import, and again we can give this any name we like, but I will use classes, and then we simply do from // and we enter the name of the file. Now the second thing we need to do is that we want to style this div, or the elements inside this div. And what we can do then is that we should give it a class name, and then with the curly braces we can say classes, and then we say .navbar, but this .navbar we will create later in the file, but hang on, for now it will make sense in a bit. Okay, let's do the styling. Therefore we go to the navbar, and if we look here then we see some bullet points, so we are going to remove that first. Now we give this div the class name navbar, so what we can now do in here is that we can say .navbar, and this is just normal CSS, and then we go to the nav element and then the unordered list element. So we go from navbar to nav to unordered list, and then we can say list style none, and this will remove all the bullet points, so we see they are gone. Now we also want to remove some default margin and some default padding, and we do that like this. Now they are presented vertically, but we want to do them horizontally. We do nav list items, and therefore we can simply do display and then say inline block, and this will position them horizontally like we see here. And of course now they are real close to each other, and we don't want that, so we can say margin 20 pixels. So yeah, this will create some space between them. Alright, now let me see, what do we want to do now? Yeah, we see some list decorations here, we can remove that. So we can simply do .navbar. Sorry, I have to mention the decorations are default created when we use the a tag. So we can say navbar nav this, and then to here. I think we can also do this, just remove this, but I'm not sure what the best practice is. So yeah, if you know what the best practice is, just let me know in the comments, you know, I really appreciate that. And I'm also not an expert, I'm a backend developer, you know, originally. So if you see something which I can do better, then let me know, I will appreciate it. Yeah, so we can say text decoration none. Now I think this will, yeah, so this will remove the decoration which we saw before. So I mean this line. So we presented them horizontally like we see here, but of course it doesn't look that smooth yet, so we have to do some magic before it will look a bit nice. And the first thing we can do is we can give it a background color. Now I will use this color, and yeah, I think you are very familiar with this color. It is 181818. It is some kind of black. Then I will give it a height of 80 pixels and a width of 100%, so the whole width of the screen. Oh, sorry, I forgot this here. And then I will say position fixed, because yeah, I want to set this position to fixed. So sorry, I want to set this position to fixed. So when we scroll down, we keep seeing the navbar. Yeah, now I cannot scroll yet, but I will show you in a bit. And let me see. We create a Z index of 999. Now this ensures that the navbar will always be placed in front of all other components or all other elements, and that will be nice, which we also see later on. So, and I think a nice effect is a little bit of opacity. So let's say 0.9. Let's see how this looks. If we still look at this, it is not positioned very nice, because yeah, it's not really the center from top to bottom, and also not the center from the left to right. Yeah, and in order to position this, we will use Flexbox. So Flexbox is a tool that makes it very easy to lay out your items, and also the documentation is pretty good, and I will place a link in the description, so if you want to know more about it, you can read the documentation, and yeah, along the way I will also explain a little bit about Flexbox. In order to use Flexbox, we can say display flex, and this will flex, and this will initialize the whole container as a flex container, and we can then say justify content and center. And this centers the child elements from the left to the right. So if we go to the browser, then we see they are positioned nicely. Now we also want to position this from top to bottom, so that it will be placed nice in the center. And therefore we can do align items center. Now if we go to the browser and we refresh it, we see that it is nicely positioned from top to bottom and from left to right. Now, another important thing is this margin, and I'm not yet sure where it comes from, but we can use developer tools, and then you do the right mouse click and you go to inspect. I think this is because when we go to the home part, yeah, you see there is some margin on this element. So when we remove the margin here to 0, then this is placed nicely at the top. So we will fix this when we are going to style the home page. Yeah, the only thing we want to do now is that we don't like this color of the text, so therefore we can say, where is it? Yeah, inside here we can say color white, and when we go to the browser, we want to do something with the hover. So when we hover with the mouse, we want to create a little bit of effect, and therefore we can say navbar, and I can give it the whole path here. And again, I'm not sure what the best practice is, but for now I will do this. And then I would like to create a border at the bottom of 5 pixels, solid. And yeah, I think this is a nice purple color. And I don't know all these colors out of my head, but I prepared them a bit, you know. When we now do this, we see something like this. So we now styled the navbar, but we use the default font here, and I don't think this is really a nice font. So yeah, let's pick a font we like, and I think Volkorn, or how you pronounce it, is quite a nice font. So let's go to the website, and I will zoom it also a bit, and yeah, I will just select all the styles like this. Not sure if we are going to use all these styles, but maybe, you know. Yeah, and then we just copy this and we go to the index.html. Where is it? It's in the public folder, and there we simply paste this. Alright, and then inside the index.css we are going to style some defaults, and of course we can also override them later on if we want to. We can then give a default for the h1 elements, and let's say we want to give them a font weight of 900 and a font size of, let's say, 63 pixels. Well, I don't know, maybe this is too large. Let's say 45. And for h2 we will use 23 and a font of 700, font weight of 700. Now, a spoiler alert, in the next video we will make everything responsive, so then we will also change this a bit, but I like to do this in separate steps, so yeah, I can explain it a bit better, and hopefully it's also more clear. We will give this a font size of 21, and then we will use this. Now I think when I now refresh the browser we have a different font. Yeah, you see this is different. Alright, so yeah, this is the Navbar. Let's now create the home page, or the home component. Of course, to make our portfolio website nice and fancy, we need some nice images, and I already prepared this a bit, so I already searched for some nice images, and therefore we going to create a new folder called EMG, and inside this folder we will place our images, and I have my images already stored in this folder, so I will select them all and I will place them all in this directory. Now, a tip for finding some nice images are websites like Pixabay. I will place the link also in the description, but with this site you can find some nice images. Alright, and another nice website which we used is Undraw, and in here you can also find some nice images that you can use, and I will also place the link of this site in the description. Alright, now let's start with the home page. Let's close all. Let's go to the home.js file, and let's give this a parent container with a name called classes.home, and of course in here we need to create a new CSS module file like we did before, so therefore we just create a new file, call it home.module.css, and then we need to import that file. So yeah, we give it a name classes, but you can give it any name you like, and then slash home.module.css. Alright, now let's create the JSX code first, and we have a parent div called home, and all the other JSX code will be placed inside this parent div. So in this case we will create a new div with a class name called container, and later on in the module CSS file we will use these class names to style the elements. And inside this div we will create a h1 tag with class name here we will say hello world, and then below that create a header that says welcome on my website. Alright, so this is the first div. Below this div we will embed an image, and we can use the image tag for this. So we will use an image tag, and yeah, we want to also style this, so we give it a class name, classes.code, and in here we specify the source, which is the path to the image. Yeah, the path to the image is import. Let's call this code from code.svg. So as a source, we can then, once we have imported, we can inject it, or I don't know how you say it, but we can specify it as a source. And then there's also an alt property, and in here we specify the text for the image if the image for some reason cannot be displayed. So if it cannot be displayed, we will just print this text, and then we close the image. Now below that we will create another image. We give it a class name and the source. So again, in the source we specify the path to the image, so we import it here, binary world, with lowercase b, and then I think it's like this, from, same like this, I mean, and then it is called binary world.csv. I think this was the name, so I will have to double check it. So we go to the image directory, and yeah, binary world.svg. So we say here binary world, and I think this is it. Now if we go now to the browser, then yeah, you can already imagine that this doesn't look nice. So yeah, this is the code image, or the image which I give the name code, and this is the image that I give the name binary world. And these are the headers, hello world and welcome on my website. But of course this doesn't look very nice, so we are going to make it look nice with the help of CSS. So we go to the home.module.css file, and the first thing we are going to do is that we give the whole home div. So this whole part, we will give it a background. Let's say for now we can give it a background of purple. Now let's refresh it in the browser. So yeah, we see that this color is used. Alright, so now we have this margin here, which we saw earlier, so we want to remove that first. Alright, so we can do .home container, and then this element, and then we can do margin 0 to remove all the margin. So now the margin here is removed, or let's remove the DevTools. Now in order to make this look a bit cleaner, we will use Flexbox again. So we will give this we will give this home container the display flex property. Now again, this will initialize the container as a flex container, and it will apply some default flex properties on it. And the default arrangements of the items inside this home container, so everything inside this home containers, the default arrangement for that will be from left to right. So if we now go to the browser and we refresh it, we now see that the items are positioned from left to right. So on this left side we have the div container with the h1 elements, and then we have the code image, and then we have the binary world image. So that's what we see here. So this div is placed all the way to the left. Then next to that we have the code image, and next to that we have the binary world image. Now let's increase the height of this div. So let's say we will give it a height of 630 pixels. Now when we go to the browser, we see this. And to ensure that the hello world title and the welcome on my website title isn't overlapped by the navbar, we can give it a padding. So we can say padding dash top, let's say 80 pixels. And when we refresh it, then we see it doesn't overlap each other. Maybe I have to zoom it in a bit. Alright, so another important CSS styling feature is absolute and relative positioning. Now, when you use position absolute on an item, it will look for a parent that has a position relative property. And if it doesn't find one, it will default to the body. So let's say we want to position this code image. Then what we can do is that we can set a position of relative on this whole container, so the whole purple page. And if we then set the position of this image to absolute, then it will look for a parent with a position of relative, which is this whole purple block. This code image will be then positioned relative to the parent container, and we can then specify where this child component should be placed inside the parent, and we can do that with CSS properties like left, right, bottom or top. Now let's show you guys what I mean with this. So let's zoom this out a bit. Yeah, so I want to place this orange code block, or how do you say it? This orange code sign here on the left. So what we can do is the following. We give the home div, so the whole purple block, we give it the position of relative. And we give the code image, we give it the class name code. So we can then say .home.code, and we give it the position absolute, and let's also give it a height of, let's say, 24%. So make it a bit smaller. Is this a typo? Yeah. Height. Alright. Now if we now go to the browser, then we see it is placed here, but what we can do is, because we have used the position absolute relative features, we can say I want to place this all the way to the bottom, and when we refresh it, we see that this is placed all the way to the bottom. Now we can also say we want to place it a bit more to the right, so we can then say, for instance, let's place it a bit more to the right, and we can give it the left property, let's say 2%, and you see it is placed more to the right. Now we can do the same for this image, so for the binary world image. So we can do .home.binary world, because that was the class name that we gave it, and we can give it a height of, let's say, 70%. Then we say position absolute, and if we now go to the browser, and I think this is the default, so yeah, the default it is placed here, but we want to position this more to the right, so we can say right 0, and then it's placed all the way to the right. So when we now go to the browser, we see it's placed all the way to the right, but I want to place it a bit more to the left. What we can then do is say like 10%, and also I want to not place it all the way on top, but let's say like 20%. And yeah, it looks something like this. And what is nice with SVG is that we can change this color. So now this color is black, but let's say we want to make it white. Then we simply go to the binary world, and I think somewhere here is a fill property. Yeah, this is set to black, but we can also say white. And when we now refresh it, this is white. So I think this already looks a bit nice. But of course, we want to style this a bit. So yeah, I think we want to position this a bit and then want to make this a bit larger than this. And I think the color white will also be a bit nicer. So let's do that now. So first we can say dot home dot container, and then also say here position absolute, and then let's say top 15%. Yes, place a bit more here, and then we can say left 2%. And I think a color of white will be nice. Yes. And now we want to make this a bit larger, so we can say color.home, and then let's say what was the class name. The class name was hello. So we can do dot hello. Let's give it a font size of, let's say, 63 pixels. Let's see how this looks. I think this looks a bit nicer, but I am not completely happy. And in order to create some nice and fancy colors, we can use the website called cssgradient.io. And I will also place this link in the description. Now, I already know two colors that I want to combine. So what we can do is, let's say this color and this color. And then you can play a bit around with this and create something you like. Maybe something like this. This will be removed. Yeah, I think this is nice, and then we can simply copy this. Go through here. Then we paste that here. Let's now go to the browser. Alright, so this is the home component. Now we're going to create the about page, and therefore we close everything here, close all, and then we open the about.js file. Now let's also create the CSS module file. So about module.css. We can already import that here. Classes from about.module.css. Alright, in here we will create a page header, and we will reuse this part in all our other components. So we want to make this once and not every time. Therefore, we will create a new stateless functional component called page header. So let's do that first. We will create another folder inside this components folder, and we call it page header. And we will give it a page header.js file and a page header.module.css. Now then we do sfc, so we can create a stateless function component. We give it the name page header, and inside here we will create a div with a class name of, let's say, classes.container, and we'll give it a horizontal rule. I will show you in a bit what this is. And then this component will accept some parameters, and we call it props. And then we give this function some arguments, and then the arguments that we give it, we print out here. And then we have to place it in curly braces, and then we can say props.title. Now, hang on, because this will make sense in a bit. Yeah, and we need, of course, when we want to style this component, which we will do later on, then we need to import this. So let's already do that. Now let's call this. So we go to the about component, and then in here we want to inject this page header. Now, as you remembered, we first need to import it, page header from dot page header / page header, and then we can inject it. So let's inject it here. Oh, there's a typo. Alright, now this component, this page header component, accepts some parameters, and specifically a title parameter. So what we can do is we can say title is, and then we have to use curly braces again, and here we specify the title of the page. So in this case it will be the title of the page will be about me. Now when we go to the browser, yeah, we see that it prints about me, and this is the horizontal rule. But of course this doesn't look very nice, so we are going to style it, and yeah, let's remove this here because we already gave it the title here, so we can remove this. Let's refresh it to see if it is removed. Yeah, it is removed. Now let's first style the header, page header. Alright, so we can say container, and we can give it the display flex property. So this will position the elements from left to right. So I think that we can also see that. Yeah, so this is the horizontal rule, and this is the title. They are now positioned from left to right. Now we are going to use the position relative absolute feature again. So here we can say position relative, and we will use this to position the horizontal rule. So we can say dot container, and then the horizontal rule tag, which is this one, and we can give it the position absolute, and then we want to place it all the way to the left, and we want to give it a width of, yeah, I don't know what would be a nice width. Let's try 24, and let's see how this looks. Alright, so it is all placed all the way to the left. You almost don't see it, so let's make it a bit larger. Okay. Yeah, here it is. We can give it a border, so it will look better, I think. Solid, and then, sorry, you know, I have a cheat sheet with all the colors, so this is the color. Let's go to the browser again. Alright, so here you see it. Alright, so we positioned the horizontal rule. Now we want to position this title. And what we can do is that we can say justify content, center. And what is important to mention is that this will only be applied to the title because we positioned the horizontal rule here. So this will only be applied for the title. Then we want to also center the title from top to bottom. So we can then say align items center. Now when we refresh it, we see that it is nicely centered. I think also a little bit of padding on the bottom will be nice. So there will be a little bit of spacing between the page header and the upcoming content. And I think we want to make this title white and then create another background here. So let's do that. So let's say padding bottom 2%. And dot container, and then for the title we give it the color of white. Alright, so yeah, now this is gone because it is white, but now we are going to create the about me page. The nice thing about this is that we can reuse this page header later on in all other components. So we created this once and we will reuse it in the other components. Well, we will give this a class name of, let's say, about me. Alright, and then here we have the page header, and below we will create a div with a class name of classes container. Yeah, I think what would be nice if we have one part with the text, and then on the other part we have a picture of me. So in here we will create a div, give it a class name because later on we want to style this, and let's say text. And then in here let's create a title saying hello, I'm Björn. And then in here, yeah, we will create some text to explain who I am. So yeah, I think it is important if you are creating your portfolio, be a bit humble. So I was thinking about something like I am the father of programming, or in other words, I am programming. Alright, I'm joking. I don't know what to place here. Maybe something like I'm a software developer based in the Netherlands. I don't know. Let's add some lorem ipsum stuff here. So something like this. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about what to place here, but we can do that later. And then in here we want to create a div for the photo. So we can say class name is classes.photo. And then again we can use the image tag. And then we need to import the photo, so we give it this name, so we can do import me from. So let's see how this looks. Oh, that's the text. Oh my god, who's this guy? It's too large. We have to style this. So let's first give the about me div a background of let's say black. Let's see. Alright. Now let's make the photo a bit smaller. So we can say about me dot container dot photo dot me, and then let's give it a height of, let's say 500 pixels. And I think a border radius is also quite nice. You get the round corners. 10%. And then, alright, I think this is better. Now, here's the text, but I have to make the color white. Actually, I think we can set the color in the index.js file because as a default, so color white, color white, color white. Now let's refresh it. Yeah, so then this color is white in all the pages, and we can, if we want to use another color, we can of course override it. Alright, so now we want to position this and this. So on the left side we want to see the text, and on the right side we want to see the photo. Now, as you know, the text and the photo are all placed inside this container div. So what we can do is we can say that about me that container, and then we could apply the display flex property, and the default arrangement of the items will then be from the left to the right. So when we now go to the browser, we see they are positioned from the left to the right. There should be a little padding on the left, or a little bit of margin, I mean, on the left side. So let's do that. And what we can do is that about me, that container, that text, and then we can give it a width of, let's say, 47%, and then we say margin left of 3%. I think this already looks a bit nicer, and I think we should override some of the defaults for this H2 title. So we can say this, and then let's give it a font weight of 900. Let's say font size. Now here at the bottom we want a little bit of padding. I think that would be nice. So we can say padding bottom 5%. Alright, so we have a little bit of padding there. Alright, what we can now do is that we want to place this photo more inside the center of the div. And then I mean this div. So the photo here is placed inside this photo div. So what we can do is we can give this the display flex property, and let's give this also a width of 50%, and then we can say justify content to position the image from the left to the right, so they will position in the center. When we refresh it, yeah, I think this looks pretty nice. Is it 100%? Yeah, let's zoom it out. Alright, so we have the Navbar created, we have the home component, and we now have the about me component. Now let's create the skills component. Okay, so this will be the second part. New sweater, same head, same video. And as you see, I also changed the screen size a bit, so now we have a full width. Let's now create the skills component. So let's close all of this, and then let's go to the skills component. And what we will do first is that we create the CSS module file. So we say skills.module.css, and in here we import it. So let's say skills classes from /skills.module.css. And the second thing that we are going to do is we created this page header. So what we can now do is that we can simply copy it, and we will paste it here. And then we remove this title. So in here we give it a title and we say, what about the skills? And then a question mark. So what will happen next? Now, well, let's first go to the browser. We need to import the page header. So that's what we're going to do now, from page header / page header. And now we should see it. Yes, we see it. And we set this default text color to white, so that's why we have to select it in order to see it. Below the page header, we will write some introduction text. Let's do some magic. Bam. Let's structure it a bit. Alright, so we have a title, what about the skills, and then a little bit of introduction text. And below this we will create another div and we give it a class name of, let's say, classes.container. And in this div we will present some skills, or we will output some skills. Now before we do that, it is important to mention that in React you can create variables with the let keyword and also with the const keyword. Now, important is that you use const if you want to use a constant value. So that means that we write something once and we then never change it. So const throws an error if you want to reassign a value to a constant. Now, in contrast, let doesn't. So you use let if you want to mutate your variables for some reason. Now, in this case, we are going to define some skills, and these are constants, so we will use const. Now, if this isn't really clear, I will show you in a bit what I mean with this. So what we can do is we can say const backend skills, and then we assign an unordered list to this variable. And in that unordered list, we will write some of the backend skills. So let's give this a title, backend skills, or just say backend. Alright, and then below here we will create another list item and we will define some skills. So I know a bit of Scala, which is a very nice language, by the way, and then Java and SQL, and we define some extra skills like Akka, Spring Boot and Slick, and we will do the same for front end skills. So let's copy this and now we give it the title front end. And I know a little bit of React, JS, HTML, CSS and Redux. Alright, now for the other skills we will do a magic trick. So what's the screen? Bam. Alright, so in each variable we store an unordered list containing list items, and those list items specify some of the skills that I have. What we can then do is that we can store all those skills inside an array. So something like this, const total skills is, and then we create an array and we will store the backend skills unordered list inside this array. We'll do that for the front end skills, for the messaging skills, for the data science skills, and what do we have? Yeah, build tool skills, and the other skills. So if we would like to do this for some reason, I don't know why, but let's say we want to say, no, you don't have all these skills, you have no skills. Now if we now go to the browser, then this gives an error saying that we are not allowed to do an assignment to a constant variable. Now if we change this to let, then we are allowed to do this. So if we now go to the browser, we see that it works, but we want to use const. So let's remove the let part. So that's what I meant with const and let, the difference between them. Okay, so now we will present those skills inside this container here. And what we do first is that we create curly braces, because if we want to use some JavaScript code inside JSX code, then we need to wrap that inside curly braces. Otherwise, React just sees it as text. So we wrap it in curly braces, and then we can loop over the array. So we can do total skills.map. So what this does is that we loop over the array and we get this unordered list, and then we get this unordered list, and then this, etc. So we can say this, and then we want to return some JSX code. So we can say div, and we give this a class name of classes.list, because I think we will style this later on a bit. And we will close the div. And then in here we just output the unordered list, and then of course we need to wrap it again inside curly braces, otherwise it will just be seen as text. And let's see what we will see in the browser. So let's first refresh it. Okay, so this is the list that we have created, and yeah, in here this is white because we set the default color to white, as already mentioned. And then here is the title. Now let's style this a bit, because this doesn't look very nice. So therefore we simply go to the skills.module.css file. Now the first thing that we are going to do is we give this a background color of, let's say 141313, some kind of black. And how does this look? Hello, what are you doing? What's wrong here? I don't know. Skills.module.css. Ah, we have to give this a class name. I thought we already did that, but no. So let's give this the class name skills. Yeah, and I think now, yeah, it gives us some kind of black. All right, now let's style this. And what we can do is we can say skills. And let me see, we gave it the class name list. We can do is skills.list UL. And we give it the color white. So the text will get the color white. And we will remove the bullet points. So this style type none. And we remove some of the default padding. And let's see how this looks. Let's position this a bit nicer. So what we can do is, in here we see this div container. So what we can do is we can say skills.container. And then we say display, oh sorry, typo, display flex. This aligns the child elements from left to right. So if we now go to the website, we see that all the child elements inside the container div, which are all the unordered lists, are positioned from left to right. However, what I want is that I want to have 3 lists per row. So I want to have 2 rows with 3 elements in it, so to say. What we can then do is skills.container.list, and then we can do flex basis 33%. Now this means that each list will have a minimal width of 33%. However, this doesn't do anything yet, because the flexbox defaults behavior kicks in now, and what that does is the following. It is simply not possible to give a width of 33% to each element that we see here. So what it then does is, because there's not enough room on a single row, Flexbox uses a different width to make it all fit in one row. So by default, Flex items will all try to fit in one row. Now, in order to change that, we can use a property called Flex Wrap, and we should use that then on the parent container. So we can say flex-wrap, and we say wrap. Now with this property, we see that there are 3 lists per row. So what this wrap property does is that if there isn't enough room on a single row, then it will simply create a new row. So that's what is happening here. Alright, so let's style this a bit more. So let's give each list a background color of black. And we will create a little bit of shadow. So let's say box shadow 0, 0, 12 pixels, 4 pixels, and the color will be white. And let's apply some border radius, 9 pixel, and a little bit of spacing between the first and the second row. So let's say margin bottom 2 pixels. Now this should already look a bit nicer. Okay, now we have this, not really smooth yet. Alright, now let's create a little bit of margin here on the left and a little bit of margin here on the right. Inside the container div, we can say margin left of, let's say, 10%, and margin right of also 10%. And if you go to the browser, we see that we now have this. Yeah, so if we look at this content of each unordered list, then it's not really placed nice in the center from the left to the right. So let's do that now. And therefore we can say .skills .list UL, and then we want to center all the list items, so we can say display flex, then justify content center, and this should center it, yeah. And let's also increase the font size a bit. So yeah, what would be a good font? 18 pixels. Yeah, maybe something like this. We can also change it later on if we want to fine tune it a bit. Alright, now we have this text here, and I want to center this also a bit. So what we can do is we can say .skills, and let's go to the GS file. Oh yeah, so this is a paragraph tag, so we can say P, and then we can say padding left 25%, and we give it a width of 50%. So the whole width of the screen is 100%. So the padding right will be also 25%, so we don't have to write that. Alright, so now we have this. Now we also want some space between below here, so we can do here padding bottom. Yeah, let's say 5%, and refresh it. Alright, so we have something like this, but this doesn't look really fancy yet. So I think one thing that will make it nice, of course, are pictures. And I already know which one I will use, so let's import that one first. So we can say import, and let's call this code thinking from img. What was the name? Let's find it. Yeah, this one, code thinking.svg. Code thinking.svg. And then let's place the image here. So let's give it the image tag. Then we say source curly braces. It was the name. The name was code thinking. Then we give it a text if for some reason The image cannot be displayed. Alright, so let's now see how this looks. Ta-da! Well, I think this looks pretty okay. Now a final thing will be this here, because I'm not really happy with that. So yeah, we can try to style this a bit. The title, we could give it a different color and maybe change the font weight a bit. Yeah, for that we will use inline styling. So you also see how that works. So what we can do is we can say const, and let's call this list title style. And then we do curly braces and we give it a font weight of 900 and a color of, let's say, and a margin bottom of, let's say, 4 pixels. Alright, so this is the style, and what we can then do in order to use this, we can just say style is curly braces, and then we place this style in here, and we will copy this and do this for all the titles. Alright, let's now go to the browser, and then we have these. Now I think this looks nice. We now have this, then we go to the about me, then what about the skills, bro? Alright, let's now start building the YouTube component. So we go to Visual Studio Code, and then the first thing that we are going to do is, again, we create the YouTube.module.css file. And let's also immediately import it here. So we do import classes from /YouTube.module.css. Now let's remove this and use the page header. So we can say page header title is, and then let's do something like I'm also on YouTube, and let's close it. And then of course we need to import it, so import page header from page header / page header. Alright, let's see if it works. Yeah, so here it is. And let's now create the content here a bit. So let's close this. And let's give this another class name, or I mean let's give this a class name, classes.youtube, and then inside the parent div we will create a new div with a class name of classes that, let's say, YouTube content. In here we will create a div, another div with a class name of classes.paragraph, and then inside this we will create a little bit of introduction, or we write some introduction. I already prepared this a bit, so alright, so here we have a little introduction text, and then below that we will place the videos. We will place them inside this div. Now for that we will create a function, and we can call that function multiple times. When we call that function, it will display a thumbnail, and we can then click on a play button, and then it will open that video. So maybe you think, what is he talking about? Hang on, I will show you. So we will create an arrow function, and we call it YouTube video, and it will accept 3 parameters: a URL parameter, a thumbnail parameter, and a description. And then inside this body we will return some JSX. Here we will create a div with a name. Yeah, give it a name, video container. And then inside that div, we will create another div with a class name of thumbnail. So this will be the image of the video. The image will be stored in a image tag. And then we want to have a little text. With that text we describe the video a little bit. So let's give this a class name of text. And in here we will display or output the description, and of course then we have to place it in curly braces. And what we can now do is that we can call this function multiple times. Of course, what you probably already noticed is that we don't use the URL here yet, but we will fix that later. But for now, we will just call this YouTube video function multiple times. And that is something which we are going to do here. But before we do that, let's first ensure that we have everything in place. So this will use a thumbnail. The thumbnails are stored inside the image directory, as you know. So we should already import them. So we have a clean code thumbnail. And let's do this also for the other images. Now let me quickly check the names. Alright. Now the descriptions, I already prepared them, so let me paste them here. Alright, so damn it. These are the descriptions. Alright, now we have everything in place to call this function, so let's do that. So in here we, of course we need to place this in curly braces, otherwise React sees it as normal text. But we want to use this function. So we have to give it a URL first. You see here, the first one is a URL parameter. So let me paste this here. Then the second one will be the thumbnail. So let's use the clean code and then the clean code video description. And then we do this also for the other 3 videos. Now, of course, the URL is different here. And this will be the Java Streams video. And this will be the Java Streams video description. Alright, so the last video. Now again, let's change the URL. The thumbnail will be lambdas entire the function, and let's change the description. Okay, let's now see how this looks like. Not really smooth yet, but it's a start, So let's first style this a bit, and after that we will fix it with the URL. Alright, so the first thing that we are going to do is that we change the background color to black. So let me see. Yeah, it's now black. And then the second thing is that this div is now 100%. So let me go back to the code. So the text is placed inside the paragraph div, and that div is now 100%. So what we can do is .youtube.paragraph, and then width of, let's say, 65%. And let me see. Alright, so this is now a bit better. So the thumbnails that we see here are pretty large, so let's make them a bit smaller. And the thumbnails, where are they stored? Let me see. So we have the YouTube div, and then we have the video. Alright, so inside the video container. So what we can do is .youtube.video container.thumbnail, and then the image tag. Then we give it a max width of, let's say, 489 pixels. And let me see. Yeah, this works. So now it is a bit smaller. Alright, so if we go to the youtube.js file, if we look at this code, we see that the thumbnail and the text are stored inside this video container. This is the text, this is the thumbnail, and we have that also for the other two videos. So let's apply some styling on this YouTube container. So what we can do is .youtube videos .video container, and then we can say display flex to position it all from the left to the right, and then let's give this temporary a background of red. How does this look? Yeah, alright, so now we have this, and let's give a little bit of margin at the bottom. So let's say margin bottom of 5%. Bottom. Alright, so now we have this, and then let's give it a height of, let's say, 300 pixels. Now we want to center this from top to bottom, and also this will be centered from top to bottom. So the thumbnail and the text will be centered from top to bottom via the align items property, and then we can say center, and we can call this because we use the display flex property. So let's refresh. Bam! Now it is nicely centered. Now as you see here, the whole red part is like 100%. If we go to the code here, what we can do is that all these videos are stored inside this videos div. So if we give that videos div a width that is smaller than 100%, so maybe something like width 70%. Let me see, how does this look? Yeah, this looks already nice. And what we then want to do is we want to place this text in the center of the page, and the div that contains the videos, we want to also center that. So in order to center everything, we can use flexbox again. So this is all stored inside this YouTube content div. So we can just do youtube content, and then we can apply the flex property on it. Now the default is that this will be positioned from the left to the right, but we don't want that because we want to position everything from top to bottom. So therefore we can say flex direction column, and then we can say align items, and this will center all the elements from the left to the right. Well, that's what I hope. So let's refresh it. No, Fook. Ah, I see it. This is a typo, you dirty little bastard. Now let's refresh. Bam. Okay, so now it is nicely centered. This whole red block consists of a thumbnail, which is the image, and a text. Now I think we can position this a bit nicer, so we can apply some padding on the left of the text and some padding on the right of the text, and we can do the same for the thumbnails. So let's do that now. We say .youtube .videos container .text, padding left, let's say 2.5%, and we will do the same on the right side. So right, we will also apply this to the thumbnails. So thumbnail, and let's see how this looks. Yeah, this looks nicer, I think. Alright, so what we can now do is we go to videos container, and in here we will say border radius 10 pixels. Then yeah, so now we have the round border, and let me see, and maybe we can also give this video container, this red block, a shadow effect. So what we can do is bulk shadow, and then we can do this with the color white. Yeah, this looks nice. And let us now change the background from red to black. Alright, so now we have this, but I want to do the final touch. So therefore, we will go back to the youtube.js file, and above the page header we will insert a new image, and we will give it the class name classes.background, because this will be a background image, and then this will be the source background, and this will be the alt. Oh, we can also do it like this. Okay, like this. Now let's import the background image. So we can say import background from, and then this path. And let me see what the name was. Where is it? The name is background. Oh, sorry. So this will be background. Dot. Now let me see. Yeah, okay, so what we will do now is we will use the relative absolute positioning, which we already explained earlier. Therefore, we go to youtube.module.css, and we will give the parent div, we give it the position relative property. And as you know, what we can then do is we can do youtube.background, and then we give this the position absolute property. And what we can do is that I want to give it a height of 100%, so it covers the whole YouTube div, and a width of 50%, so it will use the half. And I want to position it all the way to the right, 0. And I want to place it as a, oh wait, let me show you guys first what I mean with this. So I don't want that the image is in front of all this content, but I want it the other way around. So what we can then do is z-index, and we say 0. And then we want the videos in front of it, so we can give this the z-index of 1, and then you see that this is placed in front of it. And now we have to fix the paragraph. So where is the paragraph? Here. So we give that also a z-index of 1. And yeah. Alright, so this looks quite nice. Now I think we are missing one thing, and I think you can already guess what that one thing is. That is the URL, because now we can click here but nothing happens. So let's fix that. And basically what I want is I want to use a play button. So I want to create a play button here and a play button here, and of course also here on the other video. When you then click on the play button, it opens the video. Therefore we will create another arrow function which we call play button svg, because this will be an svg image. And then we do return, and in here we will return the JSX. So we give it a div with a class name, because we want to style this also, of classes.play button. And what we now do is that we give this div the onClick functionality. So what we can then do is the following. We can do this and then give it the URL, and in here we say blank. And what this basically does is that when you click on the div, it will open a new tab based on the URL that we specify. Alright, so inside here we will place the image, and I will not explain what an SVG image actually is, but you can Google it if you like. But this is something I found on the internet, so And you can very easily find this. If you Google for play button SVG or something like this, then you will find a lot of SVG images. And I liked this one. And let me see, now we just have to call this play button SVG function. And we want to call it inside this YouTube video function. So below this thumbnail, and of course we have to place it in curly braces again because we want to use JavaScript code here. We can say call the play button SVG function and we give it the URL as a parameter. And let's now go to the browser. And now you see that this is the play button SVG and we can click it, but there are a few issues. Normally you see another mouse pointer. We will fix that. And it is too large and not positioned correctly, but we can click it because if we click on this, it will open the video. Now, let's first position it. And what we want to do is that we want to position it somewhere in the middle of the thumbnail. So again, we can use the position relative absolute feature. So on the thumbnail div, we can give this div the position relative property. And then what we will do, we can say that YouTube dot video container dot thumbnail and then dot play button. Now in here we can say position absolute, so we can position this in relation to this parent div. Now let's first make it a bit smaller, so we can say let's give it a width of 24%, and let's now see how this looks. Yeah, alright, so this now looks like this, but now we want to position it in the middle of the thumbnail. So alright, so we can now position it, and let's say we want to place it a bit more to the left. Hey, this doesn't work. Oh, I already see it. Position absolution. Absolute. Alright, so let's now see. Yeah, so now it's placed a bit more to the left. Now let's say 44%. And now let's place it a bit more to the bottom. So what we can then do is, let's say top 29%. Alright, so this is a bit in the middle. And now we want to have a nice pointer. So when we slide on the play button like this, we want to see a nice pointer, and therefore we can say cursor pointer. And if we now refresh it, yeah, you see this is a very nice pointer. Alright, so this was it, the finishing touch. Now we will create the contact page or the contact component. Alright, so let's create the contact component. So the first thing that we should do is we can search for React icons. Let's zoom it in a bit. You pick this one, so react-icon.github.io. Alright, so what we then do is that we simply copy this. Then we go to the terminal. We open a new tab. Let's zoom it in a bit. And we simply paste it. And then this will install a new dependency. Alright, so it is installed. Now if we go to the node modules folder and we search for React icons, then we see that this new module is installed here. Where is it? Yeah, here. Now let's close this and let's go to the contact component, and in here we are going to use those icons. Yeah, let's first go to the website of React Icons. Alright, so the icons that we are going to use are all from the Font Awesome project. So we can simply copy this and then paste that import inside our project like this. And then we only need to specify the icon names. So one of them that we are going to use is called FA YouTube. This one, we click on it and then it copies the name and we simply paste the name here. And the other three that we are going to use are these. Alright, so these are the icons that we are going to use. And let's now use the icons. So let's remove this. And what we can then do is we want to inject the FA YouTube icon. And we will give it the color of white and a size of 30 pixels. And we use some inline styling to apply some additional padding. So let's say we will use a padding of 1%. And then we want to use some unclick functionality, because when we click on the icon, we want that the YouTube channel or the YouTube page is opened. So therefore we will use the unclick functionality, which we used earlier. And let's close this. And this unclick functionality will call a function called handle URL. And it will accept an URL as a parameter. And then in here we will open a new tab based on the URL. I think we can simply do this. In here we just call that function and we give it the URL to the YouTube channel, which is this URL. And then we simply do this also for the other three icons. So we copy it one time, second time, and the third time. And then we change the icons of FA YouTube to FA Instagram Square. We do that for the GitHub icon and for the LinkedIn icon. And now the only thing we need to do is change the URLs. So let's do that. In here we paste the URL of the Instagram, of my Instagram. And in here of my GitHub. And then in here of my LinkedIn. Alright, so let's see, how does this look? Let's close this. Let's refresh it. And yeah, we don't see the icons because we created the icons with a color of white. And our background is also white. So let's now create a contact.module.css file. And let's import that file. And let's give this a class name so we can style it. Classes.contact. So we can say .contact and we give it a background color of this. And let's now go to the browser. So now we see the icons here. And what we want to do now is we want to give it a height of, let's say, 300 pixels. And we want to use the display flex property on the container. Because if we now see this, then we want to center this from the top to the bottom. So as you know, we can say align items center. Alright, so now it is centered from the top to the bottom. And now I want to position this also in the center from the left to the right. So what we can do is we can place the icons inside a new div, which we call classes.contact icons. And then we have to close the div here. So all of them are placed inside this contact icons div. And what we can then do is we can say .contact icons. And we give it a width of 100%. Then we say display flex. And then for all the elements inside this contact icons container, we want to position them from left to right. So all the icons should now be centered. So when we go to the browser, we see that that is true. Alright, so let's zoom this a bit in. Now what we see here is that we don't see a correct pointer, which we saw earlier on, but we can click it. If we do so, it will open the YouTube channel, but we don't see a nice pointer. So yeah, we can very easily fix that as we saw before. So we can do contact icons. Oh, and actually, let's remove this. So I think we have to use developer tools now, because we use the icons from the React icons package or module, or however you call it. Let's zoom this in a bit. Let me see. So we have the contact icons div, then we have an SVG and a path. Now we want to show a nice pointer when we select this path. So what we can do is we can say .contact icons SVG path, and then we can say cursor pointer, as you know. And now when we refresh it, and let's close the developer tools. Now we see a nice pointer when we select the path element, or in other words, when we select the icon. Alright, so I think this is already okay. So the thing we need to do now is we can click this works, but this doesn't work, this doesn't work, and this also doesn't work. So let's fix that. And it is actually quite easy to fix that, because as you know, in the beginning, we created the Navbar component and we gave it these IDs. Now the only thing we need to do is that we need to specify those IDs inside the div. So in here we can say ID is .about. Now the same thing we need to do for the other components. So let's go from top to bottom. So let's do it for the contact component. We call it contact. Then for the home component, we call it home. For the navbar, we don't have to do it. For the page header also. For the skills, we need to do it. So we call it skills. And for the YouTube, we also have to do it. So let me see, where is the parent div? Here. In here we call it YouTube. Let's refresh it. Now this should go to the contact. This goes to the YouTube, to the skills, to the about me, and to the home. So that works. Alright, now as you see, when we click this doesn't go very smooth. So we can fix that, and therefore we can go to the index.css file, and we can simply do HTML, and then we say scroll dash behavior smooth, and let's refresh it. And when we now click, for instance, the YouTube page, we see that this goes much smoother. Alright, so let's now walk through the page one more time to see if we can still fine-tune some things. So we have the navigation, we have the home component, then we have the about me page, then we have the what about the skills, bro. But I think we can still fine-tune this a bit, because I think the image is a bit too large. So therefore let's close all and let's go to the skills.module.css file, and let's see how did we use the image. So we have, so the image is placed inside the container div. So here, and also I think we have to use lowercase for this. Alright, so we have fixed that. And then in the modules, we can say, and then we give it a width of 60%. Now this probably doesn't make it very nice, because now we see that. But we can fix this very simply by saying padding dash right, and then we say 40%. So it covers the whole width of the screen, because the whole width is 100%. And when we now go to the browser, we have it like this, and I think this is a bit nicer. And we can also fix this, because what we can do is everything here is placed inside the container div. So let me show you inside the code. So we have the container div, we have the image, and we have all our skills. Now, I think what is a bit smoother is justify content, and then we can say space around. And if we now refresh it, we see that this is a bit smoother. Now, maybe you don't see it very good, so let me use developer tools for that. Here we see the justify content center. Here. Now, if you look at the screen, when I uncheck it, you see this. When I check it, this. When I uncheck it, this. So this feature from Flexbox, what it does is that it places some equal space around all the elements inside this skills container div. Alright, so I think we created this a bit nicer. That was the final touch, and we have this. So that was the end of the video. It was quite a long video. I hope you liked it and you learned something from it. If so, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Now in the next video we are going to make this responsive, because yeah, if we now do things like this, then the website doesn't look very smooth anymore. But that is something that we are going to fix in the next video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I see you guys in the next video.